So hello everyone, welcome to another video. This is going to be SOC Level 2 hunting room. It is an easy room with 45 minutes of time span, and then the room is about behind the scene of threat hunting, mindset, process, and goals. And the introduction is as the purpose of this room is to introduce threat hunting as a structured concept focusing on its relationship to incident response, the threat hunting mindset, and specific goals that threat hunting strives to achieve. So, in this room, we will strive to understand what threat hunting is and discuss its role in helping secure the organization in contrast with incident response. We will also explore different threat hunting goals and discuss how these goals help develop organizations' security posture. By the end of the room, we will gain a baseline idea of what to look for and how to look for them and when to decide to move on, right? So there are some prerequisites and let's join the room. Now, core concept, threat hunting introduction. So threat hunting is an approach to finding cybersecurity threats where there's an active effort done to look for signs for malicious activities. In its most basic form, that is the definition of threat hunting. However, in order for us to rely or really understand what it entails as well as what its actual role is in the organization, we will start by contrasting it with incident response. So threat hunting in contrast with incident response. So IR is innately reactive, right? And the action or response is triggered by an initial notification or alert. So this initial notification is first triaged, then analyzed, and when enough pieces of evidence point to a malicious activity, it is deemed an incident that needs to be responded to and dealt with accordingly. So now threat hunting on the other hand is innately proactive. So there is no actual trigger that would mobilize a hunt except for pursuit of building the strength of the organization's security posture, guided by threat intelligence. A stark contrast can be seen here. While both are guided by the goals of ensuring the security of the organization, the forces that drive the reactive and proactive nature of incident response and threat hunting, respectively, hardly share the same direction. So this is further steered by the specific objective that each aim to achieve. So reactive approach, incident response, proactive approach, threat hunting, triggered by an initial notification, that is an reactive. Proactive approach is active search for suspicious events that can become incidents. Now guided by initial scope of incident, guided by threat intelligence. There's a threat that needs to be dealt with now. There might be a threat that we don't know yet. So that is the difference between IR and the threat hunting. So usually organizations start doing threat hunting when there's already an established incident response process as well as detection mechanism in place. But they think that incidents aren't being detected early enough. In the case of advanced threats, or even well-made red team exercise, there will always exist way to go through your organization undetected. So threat hunting aims to bridge this gap, constantly finding ways to add and improve the current detection mechanism in place so that future similar bad behavior will automatically be detected immediately. More so, during the process, detected threats go immediately to the incident response team. The trigger for their mobilization are the findings from the threat hunt, and consequent findings from the IR process may steer the threat hunting teams to further find bad behavior. So here is a classic example shows the beauty of synergy between two seemingly different approach to ensure one specific goal is met, strengthening the organization's security posture. So there is threat intel creation, then threat hunting, detection mechanism, detection, incident response, but in between we have detection via hunting, continuous monitoring. So we will use threat hunting while detecting the threats. So we'll detect the threats, that is also a hunting, right? So that is the correlation between incident response and the threat hunting. So now what do you call the approach to finding cybersecurity threats where there's an active effort done to look for signs of malicious activity? You know, it is threat hunting. In this task, what are we constraining threat hunting with? Of course, incident response. Incident response is innately reactive. What is done first when an initial notification or alert is received? It is contain? No. Triaged, then analyzed. So conduct a preliminary assessment of in order to determine the urgency of the need for treatment. Okay. Threat hunting is innately proactive, what it is guided by. I believe incident response. No. Guided by initial scope, guided by threat intelligence. So threat hunting is guided by threat intelligence. Threat hunting and incident response are two different approaches that aim to ensure one specific goal is met. It is to strengthen the organization's security posture. So next is threat hunting mindset. So how you approach a task would usually dictate how successful you will be. It is easy to rely on the most cutting edge pieces of technology being offered out there. But across the industry, people would always be the most important part of any security team. And so while thinking of equipping ourselves with the best tool is important, investing time and probably money in learning the proper mindset is as significant. So what's the basis for our hunt? It is imperative that we start our hunt with leads comprised of accurate piece of information such as non-relevant malware as well as trusted threat intelligence. So through leads, we give threat hunters better chances to achieve amazing things, right? And from easy wins like looking for malicious binaries to more complex hunting projects like finding patterns of activity of certain groups that target organizations similar to us or industry we are part of. Now, threat intelligence, since we are talking about the dictating the direction of a hunt, it is essential that we arm ourselves with critical information that will let us know more about the threats that we may be dealing with. Understanding the bad that we may be dealing with is akin to knowing how they might behave within our environment. So possibly allowing us narrow down our search to specific s- sweet spots, such as specific piece of data they might be interested in, or even knowing which group or APTs might be particularly interested in targeting us. So unique threat intelligence, intelligence on threats that you are able to develop internally is a very valuable asset to have. So not many organizations have the kind of intrusion experience that would allow them to study and develop usable intelligence from SAD intrusions, and even fewer have capabilities of developing it internally. Furthermore, intelligence of this kind may have the characteristic of being ultimately unique to your organization. Now, IOCs specifically documented on previous intrusions would be most obvious and straightforward example of this one. But IOCs immediately give value not only to your threat hunters but also to your detection mechanism as the actual trace of an adversary. So through this re-intrusion of that specific adversary, the other adversaries that employ the same tactics would be easier to spot. Now, threat intelligence feeds, as touched upon above, not a lot of organizations are capable of developing valuable and actionable threat intelligence internally. While a lot of organizations have their fair share of intrusions, not everyone has the kind of experience under their belt which allows them a front row seat to be specifically adversary IOCs among others. More so, it involves a lot of money, skills, and effort to be able to become an efficient threat intelligence producer. So it is not the end of the rest of us, as we can learn from other threat intelligence producer via threat intelligence feeds. There exist intelligence feeds that are both readily and publicly available. One of the most popular example of this is MISP, an open source threat intelligence and sharing platform. On the other hand, there are also paid resources that specialize in producing intelligence, some of which are capable of creating tailored intelligence for your organization. Some examples of this are Recorded Future, Relia Quest, These kind of services are not cheap, and gaining a license would typically cost an arm. However, in the hands of a capable threat intelligence analyst, the insights that you would be able to gain would be extraordinary. So there is a particular room on MISP, threat intelligence sharing platform. Okay, so threat general hunting guide, an example, unique threat intelligence, IOCs, threat intelligence feed, MISP, recorded future, digital shadow. So what is the most obvious and straightforward example of a unique threat intelligence? Most obvious would be indicators of compromise. So next is threat hunting process. So what we do hunt for. So answer to this question dictates the direction of a hunt. As a hunt progresses, the threat hunter will go back to this question, ensuring that piece of evidence that link to its answer are gathered. So the discussion regarding the example below also falls under the wide-reaching topic of threat intelligence discussed in the previous task. However, they are valuable enough to deserve to be highlighted on their own. These highlights are more focused on the kind of intelligence where their usage would merit immediate value to the hunt. They are straightforward, specific, and immediately actionable if successfully found. So non-relevant malwares. The internet is ripe with known malware samples, and a lot of them have publicly available published analysis. One example of leveraging this kind of intelligence is to take a closer look at your organization, identify the relevant threat actors that might take an interest in you, and hunt for trace of the malware that they use in their toolkit within your organization. So the example above may be a bit general, still once you identify what is the relevant to your organization, it would be a lot more straightforward to narrow down the samples that you want and consequently hunt for their traces within the scope of your visibility. So one example is like of a live malware repository is the Jew, where you may play with the live malware and gain insights into how they will work with specific environment conditions. So malware characteristics and analysis are constantly being published as well. Being a good example worth exploring is Trend Micro Threat Encyclopedia. So the Zoo, a live malware repository. This is a project created to make possibility of malware analysis open and available to public. If you're about to interact with our community, please make sure code of conduct. So attack residues. Attack residues are a great starting point as well, especially if you think that an attack has happened already. It works particularly well with good threat intelligence as it would be as straightforward as ticking off a list of attack residue to check out for within the environment. So the challenging part here, however, is knowing your environment well enough to be able to separate attack residue from normal behavior. A lot of attack residue blend well with the normal environmental noise. So pair this with a more advanced adversary who knows how to clean up after themselves, or even worse, employ tactics that are already stealthy from the get-go, and the hunt is suddenly not as straightforward as it seems. So overall, it's still a good way to cover your bases. Remember that we only need to catch them making a mistake once, while they need to constantly be perfect in their movement. So known vulnerabilities of product application being used. Threat actors are quite creative in finding vulnerabilities and misconfiguration in the products and application that their target organization use. As such, at the very least, non-vulnerability of assets should be actively hunted and patched accordingly. You might even stumble upon a threat actor actively exploiting your vulnerable assets, effectively catching two birds with one effort. So the organization should be extra vigilant for announcements of zero-day vulnerabilities that may be affecting these assets. Immediately check should be done on if the current version really is vulnerable and if there are traces of the vulnerability being exploited for as long as historical data may allow. So these hunts are a great way to retroactively check the exploitation of vulnerable assets while also ensuring that the assets of the organization are all patched and up to date with the current security standards. So non-relevant malware, example, attack residue, indicator of attack, and IOCs, and known vulnerabilities, CVEs, and zero-day vulnerabilities. So the discussion above is a general discussion of usual threat and targets and is in no way of an exhaustive list, albeit the list above is a good example to start. So every organization has their own quirks and unique characteristics that must also be factored with whenever a hunting task or project is tackled. So how do we hunt for it? So reviewing the array of information and factor and other elements for consideration above would hopefully lead us to understand the target for our hunt, right? And now that we know what we want to hunt for, how do we hunt for it? Is the sensible next question. So this section will not only touch upon hunting theories and specific hunting technique, these will discussed in the few more rooms and rather focusing on driving force that these theories and techniques are based on. So attack signatures and IOCs. Upon identifying the subject of the hunt, it is imperative that we ensure that we character, characterize them into specific and actionable identifiers, right? By which we immediately recognize, of course. Now this is done most effectively via attack signatures and IOCs. By condensing the what's of the hunt down of attack signature and IOCs, we suddenly have a set of information that we can then immediately compare to our available historical data. This make it easier to find objects of interest such as relevant malware, attack residues, and even exploitation of known vulnerabilities. Keep in mind that we do need to know how the environment behaves and consequently what the logs would look like when said vulnerability has been exploited. Similarly, logical queries. Some hunting projects are best accomplished via logical queries. A straightforward example of this one is hunting for assets that have known vulnerabilities. Applying what we have discussed above and characterizing the vulnerable asset via specific actionable identifiers, such as application version, would allow us to craft logical queries that filter for these identifiers. This essentially gives us low-hanging fruit for easy picking that at the same time impact the organization's security posture directly. The final one would be the pattern of activity. So at the end of the day, we already narrowed down the specific bad, like relevant threat actors and etc. And that we want to focus on the next sensible step is to characterize their behavior through the pattern of activities that they are inclined to make. In any conversation regarding this MITRE attack has been always top resource, and it may be as well the star of the show here. So malwares are constantly being used in a toolkits of threat actors. What is the live malware repository we touched upon? So knowing what is normal in your environment and separating them from what's not is a skill all threat hunters should have. What example of threat intelligence blend well with the environmental noise? So threat actors are quite creative in finding vulnerabilities and misconfiguration. What should the organization be extra vigilant in monitoring for announcement of? The final one is characterization of the subject of the hunt into specific and actionable identifier is imperative for the hunt success. How is it done most effectively? So task 5 is about practical applications. So our purpose, let's focus on MITRE ATT&CK Navigator. So the Attack Navigator is a tool designed to make it easier to visualize your defensive coverage, your red, blue team planning, the frequency of detected techniques, or anything else you want to do. Not only does this show the specific attack techniques that we should look for, but it also gives an idea of how an attack flows, and it shows it is in a visual appealing way. So the attack navigator will be used to answer the question in this task. If you haven't already done so, please click above. So the attack navigator page having 4 options like create new layer, open existing layer, create layer from other layers, create customized navigator. So I think we are going to create a new one, enterprise attack. And next is select the magnifier glass under selection control. And type WannaCry. The software part of the result should show one result, and we have to select that. So here it is software. It shows one result and we have to select. We'll select this. It then should show something like this. So all these areas highlighted inside the blue box are the techniques used by WannaCry. So for example, in execution, it is in window management, instrumentation, and discovery through file and directory discovery, lateral movement, exploitation of remote services, lateral tool transfer, and so on. So to better visualize our selection, select a background color under Technique, Controls. It will immediately fill the selected techniques with the color of the choice. Let's also set an arbitrary score of 1 to this layer, the control for which is beside the background color, still under the technique controls. Finally, we can set a name for this layer by editing the layer information under layer control. It should look something like this. Take note that hovering on the technique should show the score. So when I hover over these technique, it shows here the score is 1. Alright. Now in the same attack navigator, repeat all the steps for 2 more threads, Stuxnet and Conficker. You can do this by simply clicking plus button on the top of the page and then repeating the same process we have outlined above. Let's create in another page. Stuxnet, select. Let's color it to green. Score it to maybe 6. So now when I hover over these different techniques, it shows the score 6, and this is all related to the Stuxnet, right? Or we can do it here as well. New tab, layer, enterprise, and the next one is Conficker. Conficker, not flicker. Select. Let's score it for 7 and color of yellow. Perfect. So once you have repeated these steps above both Stuxnet and Conficker, let's proceed to the next one by clicking plus button. Create a layer for other layer and choose Enterprise Attack V14. This one. And under domain, and then put A plus B plus C on the score expression. So in this case, I'm just selecting A plus B because I have created the other layer in the separate tab, so it won't count. So why it is not showing the create layer button? Like it is showing the button, but it is grayed out. So I can't click here. Let me quickly create all these layers again. So first is WannaCry. Let's try again with, oh, so we selected mobile MITRE attack. I think it should be, so anyway, these three threat actors are going to be combined in this module where we are going to create a layer from the other layer, and it will show something like this, in which all the threat actors are shown in this single interface, right? Now the differing color are set to be able to immediately see which common tactics or techniques these threat actors share. A deep red color means it's a common to all of them, while the other lighter colors mean it's either one or combination of two threat actors. The scores are arbitrary and you can set them in terms of relevance to your organization or just random if you just intend to play around with the tool visually. And question at the end of this task would be related to this specific attack navigator layer. So these tools and resources at hand would allow for a more straightforward approach to identifying pattern of activity. Once we are satisfied with the way we have characterized the relevant threat that we wanted to focus on, we can then start hunting. This intelligence-driven approach of characterizing threat actor behavior through their TTPs in one of, if not the best way to go about hunting. It immediately gives value to the hunt and it's sensible, straightforward and actionable. So MITRE has done a lot, not only with the cybersecurity sphere but also in the subject that generally help build a safer world. So what do we decide to move on? So when we decide to move on, the single biggest challenge in threat hunting is knowing when to decide to move on to other things. When you when will you know you are done with it? Here's the capture the flag analogy. In CTF, you immediately know before you even start that by the end of it, if you do everything right, there will be a flag waiting for you. If you weren't able to get the answer, that just means that you need to study more and further improve so that the next time you tackle a similar problem, you will have more chances of capturing the flag. So that's not necessarily the case for threat hunting. It's completely possible and even more probable than not that you do everything right and not find anything. So it will be normal to feel inadequate. There will be internal doubts when hunting for threats, but as long as you follow your process, especially with the hunting plan that's intelligence driven, you should be fine. So what tactics has the most technique highlighted? Lateral movement? No, most. So I have found the reason why it is not selecting here. So when we go to the one of the threat actors such as WannaCry, and when we see it in the information layer information, it shows here MITRE ATT&CK version 17. So we have to select here version 17 and then create layer. There we go. Now we are ready to answer the question. So which layer is the highest, is the layer with the highest number of tactics highlighted? 2, 3, 4. I think discovery. So which technique does the three threat have in common? So one is remote system discovery. These all red color techniques are shared by all three threat actors. Now, so here we have the score of 7. It means it includes all the three threats. So we have score 1, 2, and 4. So we add all the three score, it will conclude to score 7. So it is exploitation of remote services. So what technique does WannaCry and Conficker have in common? So that must score to 5. This one. Inhibit system recovery. System recovery. So what's the score of technique that Stuxnet and Conficker have in common? Need not to go on that page. Stuxnet is 2 and Conficker is 4. So total must be 6. Task 6 is goals. So far we have talked about the threat hunting concept as well as what's the hows and even the whens behind the threat hunting mindset. Now it's time to talk about the whys. Proactive approach to finding bad. So threats are one of the constants in the world of security. There will be never shortage of malicious actors, from script kiddies to well-funded advanced persistent threats. There will always be someone snooping around your environment. And with that in mind, it is imperative that you find them first and you find them fast. Ideally before they are able to do what they set out to do. So discover pre-existing bad. So through complex and sophisticated attack chain, chance, and even mere luck, it is reality that some activities of malicious actor may slip through an organization detection mechanism. In that sense, similar kind of activities are essentially undetectable. So however, they are not invisible. It's just that detection mechanism haven't yet been deployed to automatically flag these activities. So it is through threat hunting that we are able to find these activities, and upon such discovery it will consecutively trigger an incident response. So this learning will ultimately be fed back to the continuous monitoring process of the SOC. Now minimize the dwell time of attackers. Another byproduct of undetected threat actor activity is having essential a free pass to further snoop around within the environment. The longer a bad actor has access to your environment, the more opportunity they have to further learn about it. So with a deeper understanding of the environment, an attacker may execute more sophisticated ways of persisting within the environment, cause bigger damage to important assets or information and steal more data. So the primary goal of threat hunting is to minimize a threat actor's dwell time. Ultimately, security is the business of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization's assets, and minimizing dwell time also minimize the damage a threat actor might have already caused, and develop additional detection methods. So in the end, we want to be able to use all these findings as feedback to our continuous monitoring process. Security is a continuous development process, so we wouldn't want to hunt for the same threats over and over again. Instead, once we have profiled threats that were previously undetectable by current detection methods, an effort should immediately be poured into translating these profiles into detection mechanisms. In fact, future similar threat will be immediately detected and actioned upon. So what is the primary goal of threat hunting? So the primary goal of threat hunting is to minimize a threat actor's dwell time. Feedback is important to keep organizations secure. Upon profiling threat through our threat hunting efforts, what should these profiles be translated to? Detection mechanisms. So now you are aware of the baseline consideration that go with threat hunting. It's time to get your hand dirty and flex your threat hunting skills. The rest of the walk through rooms in this module will focus on different stages of the attack chain, discussing the core hunting theories. First, before going for a deep dive into those theory challenges will also be store for you that will allow you to find evil with a minimal guidance. So this allow us to complete this room. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.